our two young activists who I've been referring to this entire time, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Tyleika McMillan works to educate lawmakers and stakeholders from the White House to corporate C-suites on the challenges and opportunities that are facing communities by advocating for more resources and policies that help invest and advance economic and social equality. Tyleika helped organize the 2020 Commitment March on Washington, 2021 March on Voting Rights, which drew hundreds of thousands to Washington, D.C., calling for racial justice, police reform, voting rights protections, census participation, and much, much more. It's so nice to have you. Thanks for joining me. Alicia Butler is a native of Seattle, Washington, currently is serving as the Health and Wellness Policy Advisor for the National Action Network, where she's responsible for overseeing all their national health and wellness initiatives centering on Black health equity. She works closely with legislators on Capitol Hill and the White House, acting as the National Action Network's liaison. It's so nice to have you as well. I'm going to start where Jean Theoharis left off, which was, and every time I have a conversation with Jean, I'm like, oh, a thing I hadn't thought about before, trusting young people. I'm curious if that was something that you took away from the documentary, because I will tell you, until Jean said it at that moment, I was like, oh, I hadn't really thought about the degree to which she really felt like, I trust young people to lead the way.
Yeah, I think when you look at the history of all of the major civil rights groups and leaders, you see a John Lewis who was 25 when he got a skull fractured on Bloody Sunday. You see a Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, when he was 25 leading SNCC, and then you see a Chairman Fred Hampton who did massive work at 21 before he was assassinated, that they were the ones carrying a lot of these movements that we see. And so when we talk about trusting young people and trusting young voices and the nuances of those things, we have carried essentially the soil that was laid out in the framework from the people above us and are taking it, realizing that these causes are bigger than ourselves. And so I think it's extremely important to keep young people at the front lines of these movements.
I sometimes worry when we take a look back historically that young people like yourselves, like the three of us up here, that you almost like roll your eyes like, oh, what's the relevance? Today, people are organizing around social media. All the work that you're doing is very, very, very different from the way that it was done in Rosa Parks' day. Are there pieces of it that feel irrelevant to you, or are there pieces that you think are extremely relevant that are actually motivational for you?
Yeah, I think we have such a great opportunity as a tool with social media to really galvanize a generation of young folks to really get involved in this movement. But I think the problem that we face in this generation, I think, is complacency and comfortability. Even throughout generations, a lot of folks get comfortable or feel we have arrived somewhere, that we have, as Rev would say, we feel that we have accomplished our resumes, or we have got the job that we wanted and live in the house that we want to live in. But the fact that the reality is, as we look at our history, that there were folks who wouldn't even look at our resume. So we have to get outside of our complacency and our comfortability and really shift that narrative. But we have such a great opportunity to really organize and use social media as a tool to really get the word out and to bring groups of people together from across the world.
One thing that was, I think, surprising for me early on as we started looking at roughs of this documentary was the degree to which, and Yoruba mentioned this, just that danger was ever present, right? The doc opens with this idea of defending yourself against the KKK and really doesn't slow down after that. As young activists today, do you feel sometimes that you're put in dangerous positions? Is that something of the past?
I think the nerves come from the climate shift that we've seen over the last few years that have created a sense of fear. But we also recognize that coming into this work, there are risks, as we've seen throughout the course of history, of pushback and people putting their literal lives on the lines to fight for causes that are bigger than themselves. So I think that that's always in the back of our minds. But one part in the documentary that I liked, the guy was saying, Ed Nixon, he said, if a cause is not worth dying for, then it's not worth fighting for. And I was like, that's really profound, because we've see a John Lewis still going after getting his skull fractured. I mean, I don't know what I would have done. I can't fathom and imagine what that looked like. And that's why I just get so annoyed when people say, I'm not my ancestors, I'm not this. Yeah, we're not. I don't know if we're as resilient as they are. But there's a level of respect that I have for them because the consequences and the risk and the stakes were a lot higher now. And we are now sitting in the fruits of their labor, and we're able to build upon that work without necessarily facing death at our doorstep the way they had to.
It's this saying that I love. It says, jail does not scare me. Death does not scare me. Bondage does. And you know, we can deal with a few internet trolls. You know, it comes along with the territory. And I think, you know, that's the risk of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and being able to, if you're really gonna be about it, you gotta stand on business. And sometimes standing on business can put you in harm's way.
How about feeling disheartened? I thought it was really interesting when she talked about just sometimes feeling overwhelmed by the obstacles. You know, when she's talking to Larry King, that clip from CNN, where, you know, and I know she relied heavily on her faith, but it was one of the first times that I'd seen a civil rights leader like genuinely show that they were exhausted by all that they had done over their life. Often I think we see them as very resilient and moving forward and, you know, galvanizing, the very Jesse Jackson type leader we saw in his remarks. And so I'm curious, how do you deal with that? Are you exhausted? Do you sometimes look up and say, like, I don't know that this next thing is surmountable?
I am exhausted. I'm also motivated. I am fired up. I'm ready to continue the fight. I think it was refreshing to see that level of defeat, but also optimism. And even when we reference Dr. King, when he's giving his last speech, I've been to the mountaintop, where he talks about foreshadowing his death and talking about how he's seen the mountaintop and he's been to the promised land and he's seen all of us there, and he may not get there with us, and the next day he was assassinated. It's really refreshing to lean into that optimism and take it with us and say, if they can do it and they can see it, why can't we? And I think we have a responsibility as young activists to ensure that we are leaving this space and this world better for the next generation to pick it up and continue to do that.
And continuing what you were saying, I think we have such a dope opportunity. You know, a lot of folks can say what we would have done in the 60s, or I would have did this, how did they, oh, they wouldn't have did this to me. But now we are living in this moment where history is recording what's happening now. And so the question is, when our children's children are looking back at this moment, what the question is, what side of history did you stand on? And I want, you know, the optimism is in the fact of fighting for, you know, the generations who may not see it now. You know, I may not see it in my lifetime, but at least I can say that I put tooth and nail in to ensure that something comes out of this.
The most optimistic and impressive people, I think, are young people when it comes to, and just with high energy, to tackling some of these problems. But also sometimes, I have interviewed many young people who sort of just feel like, meh, it's not about me, or it's not what I, you know, it's not an issue that affects me. I'm good. How do you, as young activists, engage those folks? Not the ones who are engaged and see themselves as part of a bigger picture, but the ones who don't.
I have conversations with my friends, debates really, who are not necessarily in this space all of the time, and I think you just have to make it personal. You know, I had the privilege of being one of the lead organizers for the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington this past August. And there were so many young people who didn't even necessarily understand the ramifications of what was going to happen and the consequences of what could happen, but they understood that they needed to be at the front lines and be a part of the right side of history. And I think when you're committed to understanding that, when you take yourself out of it, even if you think that you're not going to be moved by whoever's in a presidential office or anything like that, you recognize that your peers, and for the overall sake of humanity, that someone else is. And when you're able to put other people sometimes above your own needs, you're able to kind of move forward with the level of optimism and wanting to see it through. So,
excellent. Alicia and Tyleik, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it. And can I just get a Big round of applause for everyone who worked on this project. Thank you, guys. Before we end the program today, I just want to thank all of our panelists, Yoruba and Johanna, and Jean Theoharis, and of course, Alicia and Tylik, as I just mentioned, and also our partners, the League, the MLK Library, the MLK Foundation, Soledad O'Brien Productions. If you want to get a copy of the book, and I am telling you, this book is excellent, please go to the 5th floor for a book signing. Dr. Jean Theoharis will be there signing books, and it's a great opportunity to get one. Thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate it.